I filmed this once and forgot to turn my mic on. So take two. It took me a while to even figure out I had done it. I did a lot of filming with no mic. Don't know where my brain is. But anyway, I just didn't push the button long enough and it wasn't on. So let's start with fit check. I am wearing one of my favorite patterns. I think it's, let me find it. It's this one. I've made it lots of times. There's a video to it. I'll put it up in the link or down in the description if you'd like to sew it. I've made this, in the video, it's like a blue with daisies. Super cute. I also have it in a gingham check. I have it in a Liberty of London fabric. I made it in this, and yesterday I sewed it twice. I made this one and I made a red and white polka dot one, same sleeve. It has the short sleeve version in the video, but it's a very fast project. So that's today's fit check. If you would like to sew it, let me talk to you about what we're going to sew today. I went shopping in my stash and let me show you what I found. These are all tricot knits. I'm pretty sure most of these are from back when I worked at Bernina of Tulsa nearly 30 years ago. They're about 60-inch wide, 60-ish. All of these are. Tricot can come as wide as 108 inches. I've seen it 60, 72, and 108, I think. So you'll have to look for it. You can get these on Etsy. There's a couple lingerie supply companies out there that will carry printed tricots like this. You can also get plain tricot, and it comes in different weights, where it's quite sheer to quite opaque. This one with the roses on it. This one I think I've sewn on here before, and this is a little piece that's left of that one. And then this one, which has got purple roses and blue and khaki daisies on it. So I'm going to measure out and see which one has the right amount for my project. And the other thing this project needs is stretch lace trim. And I bought this off of Etsy recently. This one, because I use a lot of this, I went ahead and bought a reel. I think this is 25 yards of this nice stretch lace. The pattern says 3/4 of an inch. Very hard to find 3/4 of an inch when I was searching on Etsy. It didn't come up that often. This one is like 1 1/8 inches, just a little wider. I did have this one that I bought a while back off of Etsy, and this one is closer to 3/4 of an inch. And I also got a bunch of black, again, because I use this so much. And then I have this soft pink also. So I've got all of these options depending on which one I use. I knew this would go with all of them, so I got quite a bit because I will be using it again. Now let me show you the pattern. Again, I got this off of Etsy. I knew I wanted this pattern. I've been looking for it. It was in my list of patterns I want to sew. This is Stretch and Sew 2090, the Empire waist, the Empire nightgown. This was originally owned by Connie. Evidently, it was not cut. So cute pattern. I wanted to sew this one. I looked when I pulled it out, when I got it, made in 1982. So I was 11 years old when this pattern was made, which I just think tickles me. The style is awesome though, pretty classic. And this would make such a cute little like swimsuit cover up. I could see, or a sundress even, if you were small enough to wear, you know, I'm too busty to go without a bra, but it's sure cute. I could see it would be easy to translate into something like that, made it a soft drapey knit, or even do this back part in all lace, have a lacy or sheer back part like that would be very pretty, or even have like the cups and the bodice in lace. Lots of ways you could sew this up differently. It would need to be a stretch lace. This is really meant for knit, so you have to watch for that. But this is our pattern. I've already traced off my size. I do a little trick for hip. It fits fine on top, but I need a little more fullness in the hip. It's Empire waisted, which is fine. It's when it gets a little down in the hip, sometimes it's just a little bit snug for me. So I'll show you my little trick when we go to cut out, which is what we're going to do now. And we'll see what fabric I picked, because I'm going to lay them out and see which one I have enough of. This is the fabric that I've decided to go with, and you can see I have lots of it. Tricot knit is usually 60 inches wide. There are some that come as wide as 108, which is just lovely when you can get it that wide. So here's my front and my back, and this is my trick to give fullness in the hip without changing your grain line. The grain line is parallel to the fold. So if you swing this out, I'm leaving exactly on the corner up here at the waist so it doesn't change and everything still fits together here, because I don't need to change at this waistline. I need to change the fullness. So if I swing out from the waist, you can see this is how much I'm adding as I go. Let me spin to this one. Waist, and you can see this is still waistline. The hips are way down here because this is empire waisted. So it adds, as you go down, fullness, and it also makes the hemline fuller. So it gives us a couple of things. And since I did that front and back, I'm adding a couple of inches easily front and back, or about 4.5 inches, 5 inches total in the hip, which will just give me a little extra ease. You could always add to this outside edge. You can shape this outside edge if you needed to, but this is sort of my little trick to add to it. You have to make sure you have enough fabric if you're going to do this. It does eat into your fabric, and if your fabric's not wide enough, then you won't be able to get your bodice pieces out, which you can see I have plenty of room on the side, plus I have all of this down here. Probably have enough. I could make me a little matching panty if I want. Okay, we're ready to start sewing, and I'm going to start this over at the cutting table because I think it's easiest to show you. If you look at our directions, we're butting up the bodice, which is this little section here. I'm going to actually do some real close-ups for you, and then we're going to start pinning on our elastic. And it actually has notches. On the back, you mark those notches. They're super important because we're going to stretch between those notches, and if you don't know where the notches are, you can get your stretch off a little bit. On these pieces, we're just pretty much laying it flat. You're not doing a lot of stretching. We're just laying it flat. You're butting it up to the edge of the piece. These are just butt up to each other. I think I've mentioned this before, but back in this time period, they loved taping things in. I remember taping in zippers was really popular. Here they show taping those little butted up edges to each other. I'm not going to do that. I'm just pinning it. You could do a little tack if you wanted to. If you want to tape, tape. I'm just letting you know now. It dulls your needle. You can get glue transfer from the tape depending on the tape you use. And it leaves, often it will leave behind little sharp pieces stuck in your stitches. So it's just like not very comfy, and you have to go back and pick all of that tape bits out. Not for me. So up to you. If you want to tape it, go for it. Make sure your fabric doesn't unravel or fray a lot, because tape can also pull apart a soft knit like this. So there's my tape warnings. Let me show you some close-ups of what we're working on. So here we are, laid out the same way, and we're starting to pin. Now I've actually started on the opposite corner from this, so here I am pinning. And we're just matching it up to the edge of our fabric and putting some pins in. This poor lace was pretty crumpled up. I flattened it out, but I haven't done a lot of pressing on it yet, so if it looks a little wonky, that's why. This lace is going to come from this outside of the armhole of the front bodice, across the back neckline to the other armhole. So you're going straight across. And then we're going to come back and cross this piece with another piece of lace coming down. So it's actually going to cross over itself right here at the shoulder. This is the top of the shoulder, this little spot right there. So we're just pinning here's my notch. So that's as far as we've pinned. On the directions it says find out what 5/3 of this dimension is. Now they could have, because this is their sizing, they could have said, they could have done the math for you instead of asking you to math it out yourself, or you can just stretch your lace a little bit. But what they're wanting you to do is between the notches figure out what 2/3 of, I think I said 5/3, what 2/3 of that measurement is. So if it's 9 inches across there, you would want 6 inches, and that's what you would measure this 6 inches on your lace and stretch it so that it pulls it in 2/3 across the center back of the neck in the bodice. So here is the 10 inches on the lace, but all the way over here is my notch. So I'm going to stretch this all the way over here and pin it, stretch it out, and put some more pins in to make it nice and even for my nice zigzag. And then I can finish or continue pinning down the other side. Oh, it's going that way. Okay, so this is it pinned on and ready to go to the sewing machine. I'm just going to trim off my lace here transfer everything over. Make sure you've got plenty of pins so it doesn't fall apart on you. I've got extra pins on my shoulders, which really helps for transferring it, and we're ready to stitch. When setting up your sewing machine, I'll show you the settings over there, the zigzag, and match the top with your lace. Whatever your thread is should match your lace so it disappears. We are ready to start our first lace application. Let me show you the machine settings. I've just set it for regular zigzag. My width is 2.5 and my length is, let me move my finger so it'll show up, 1.3. It's a plain old zigzag. This is how it's set up at the machine. So I'm going to be zigzagging along this edge. We actually come back and trim out from behind the excess lace or the excess fabric when we're done, so that you sort of have just lace in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and just start stitching down. Right here is where they're butted up to each other, and we just want to make sure that we don't get any separation in this little spot coming up. So I'm gonna double check it when I get close. I can tell my needle's having a little bit of an issue with the lace, not the tricot, but with the lace. It's sort of once in a while almost giving me a skip stitch. It's not, but I can just see it's not real happy, and I can tell it has to do with the rubber. There's actually some rubber in this lace, and my needle's like not loving it. Now, this is where on the pattern we change directions, and I don't want to be on this edge anymore. I actually want to be on this edge. So I'm going to do a little, it's going to help hold those two together. And now we're ready to go down this edge. And this gets crossed coming back the other direction with lace. So now here's where we're going to start stretching once we pass this pin. So I'm going to sink my needle here at the pin, and I'm going to grab at the next pin right here and give it a tug. And I'm holding on back here so that I don't pull it out from underneath my needle. Ready to readjust. I sink that needle, and that gathers up that lace, and depending on how soft your lace is, it may stretch it out a little bit, it may not, but this is how it's going to start looking. You can see that the zigzag sort of disappears. I went ahead and did the ivory on the back, and then we're going to come back and trim away this when we're done with this line. So I'm just going to continue doing this all the way around. Again, when you hit this shoulder seam here on the back, we're coming here, and then we're going to cross over and come down this side. You're not doing this outer edge. We're trimming away that. It's a little confusing, but that's what you're doing. Okay, we're going to be back at the sewing, or at the cutting table for laying out lace. Matched up our bodice. We've started pinning it on. We've done this pinning and the stretching. We've sewn it, and if you look real close right here, you can actually see where they show stitching along this edge, crossing over to stitch along this edge, okay? Now we're ready to start pinning the opposite direction. Let me show you the next step in lace application. This is what we've done so far. Here's the two fronts, sort of like bra cups. Here's the back, and this is our lace. It's sewn along this edge. My stitching comes down, and then I've sewn along this edge. You can see the little gathers are right here along that. Now we're going to just come back with our lace, and we're going to cross it. So we're going to start all the way up here, and we're going to pin, and we're going to cross over that shoulder and pin down both sides and do the exact same stitching. There's no stretching this time, and we're sewing on this edge here. And we will be crossing over the same thing. We'll stitch along here, we're gonna cross over and stitch along here. So we kind of do this little crisscross right in this area. And what I'm going to do when I'm done is I'm going to just sew sort of a diamond just on the lace part, and that's just to get the lace to lay nice and flat along that shoulder, and then we will have the lace all applied. Now if you have lots of extra lace left over, this would look really pretty along the hemline. This does not show putting lace along the hem. I do not know if I have enough. If I do, I'm definitely going to do it. If not, we'll just do a regular little turned up hem. This pattern has 1/4 inch seam allowances. The only place we need to really worry about that is in the skirt. A lot of the stretch and sew and quick sew have 1/4 inch when dealing with knits. All right, we're gonna finish pinning both sides, and I'll see you back over at the sewing machine. Okay, I'm just sewing in the lace we pinned just a minute ago over there. I will warn you, if you're having problems with this, sometimes sewing machines like to eat the fabric. If your throat plate has a wide opening for your zigzag, and if your needle's at all dull, it'll just push all of this lightweight lace and fabric down into it and eat it up. So if you see any issues, it's not moving at all, stop immediately. Don't just keep going. That's how you create the thread ball on the bottom, and you have to remove everything from your sewing machine to fix it. So this is the kind of project that would do that. So just really keep a close eye on it. And that's why you see me sewing with my hands on my fabric like this. I'm not pulling it all, but I'm keeping the tension tight to help prevent the fabric from getting poked down in. I have a new needle on there. I tried to get my thread weight and everything matched up right, but it doesn't mean it still can't happen. Ballpoint needles sometimes help and sometimes make it worse. It's just one of those, you'll have to try it to see. This is where you're on this side and you kind of sew across and come down the other side. That's what's getting ready to happen. You want to make sure you don't have any lace flipping over in the midst of it. Making sure my pieces haven't separated from behind. Normally I don't sew over a pin, but that one was holding all those layers together, so. And that is one side, and now you can see how it's trimmed out in lace. So now I'm just going to go back and do the other side the same way, and then we'll move on to the next step. We have all of our lace on, and now we need to start trimming out from behind. So I'm going to get my scissors here, and we're just going to trim away the fabric from behind the lace wherever possible. And I'm using these scissors because it helps me from accidentally cutting through something I don't want to. And we're going to do that on the whole shebang. So we're going to be here for a bit trimming, and I won't make you watch it. But what it does is it gives you this pretty sheerness behind the lace as opposed to that. Can you kind of see the difference between the two sides with fabric behind it and without? And it just makes it look prettier. So we're going to trim everything out, and then we'll be back for the next step. All trimmed out, I'm going to go ahead and just do this little tack right here, and then I'm going to run my basting lines for under the bust. So let's head to the sewing machine and do those things. I'm literally just doing a little short tack down here just to hold everything together. Now we're ready to run the basting lines. I'm going to set my stitch length to 4. And we're going to do 2 separate basting lines. So do your cups independently. I'm going to do between the lace. It's always best to have 2 lines if you can. I'm actually going to switch to a straight stitch foot because this is such soft fabric. The straight stitch foot gives more support around the needle and will help keep it in place and keep it from wanting to poke down into that wide throat plate. So here is the zigzag foot I was using. Here is the straight stitch foot. So you can see how much more support you get, how much more there is holding the fabric down with that foot than with this foot. See the difference? Okay, let's switch our foot. Little lever in the back pops right off. The other one pops right on, which is great. Quick change feet. I've set my machine for a basting, and I am going to baste. I'm holding on to my tails of my thread when I start. Depends on your machine, everything, but you want your thread under your foot, hang on to them, you want them out of the way. If you don't, depending on how soft your fabric is and how your machine works, it can pull either the top thread into the bottom bobbin or the bobbin thread down into it, or you can just get like a messy knot on the back side. And since these are for gathering, we're not back stitching, and I definitely do not want a little knot in my thread. So I'm hanging on to it. I'm also kind of hanging on to my fabric. It's so lightweight, it wants to just shear and gather on its own, and I don't want that to happen yet. I want to have more control over that when I get to the gathering to fit it onto the garment with my pretty lace. Make sure you leave tails. So it's still gathered a little bit, but not bad considering how lightweight it is. So I have one basting line down there. I'm going to come back and do another. Isn't that pretty? Let me just hold this up for you for a minute so you can kind of see how it's looking. Isn't that sweet? Isn't that pretty? All right, I just read my directions because I'm thinking this is so narrow, and they actually have you basting 1/2 inch and 7/8 of an inch, which means this part does not have 1/4 inch seam allowance on it. This part has wider seam allowance. Good to know. So I've done one at 1/4 of an inch, which is narrower than they said. I'm going to move on up, and you know what that's about? That's about how wide your lace is. So I get what they're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and move on up, and I'm going to do this one closer to the 1 inch mark. Yeah, I wish I'd paid more attention. You really want your basting lines closer to what they have. It really has to do with how wide your lace is, because we cut away from behind here. This little part, we're getting lost. Probably going to take out that first basting line and redo it. I will show you. I'm going to go ahead and redo my basting, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So you're going to do one. Depends on how wide your lace is. Mine is just about, it's like 7/8 of an inch. They request 3/4 of an inch. And that's just, I couldn't find that. So I have this one that's 7/8, and I had another one that was 1 inch and 1/8. So I'm going to redo my basting. So here's the basting. I did not read carefully enough, unfortunately. It says to baste at 1/2 inch and 7/8 of an inch, and that's for the width of our lace, how wide our lace is going to be that we're cutting away. So I did the first one at 1/4 of an inch because I really was thinking, oh, this only has 1/4 inch seam allowance. Duh. So here's my 1 inch away, and here's my 1/4 inch. I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to ignore this one. I'm going to come in and do one at about the 1/2 inch mark like it requested so I can get my gathers right. But anyway, this is how it looks. Make sure when you're doing this that you don't backstitch and that you're watching that you don't over gather, because you can see it naturally just wants to gather it because the fabric's so lightweight. I just finished my gathering lines, and now it says measure around your body under the bust line and cut a piece of lace 4 inches smaller than that measurement. So come to your body and whatever your body looks like. You take your tape measure underneath your bust line and measure, and then subtract 4 inches. So whatever you measure right under your bust. So like, if I look in the mirror here, wherever your bra is, see where the bra is under the bust? That's kind of where you want to measure on your body. Subtract 4 inches. I have cut my elastic the size that I need. And then it says butt up and zigzag with each other. I cut mine just a little. It said cut it 4 inches smaller. I cut mine like 3.5 inches. So I had a little 1/4 inch of seam allowance. So I overlapped mine instead of butting up. It's easier. It's just easier to keep everything together. You won't have any tension pulling. This is actually a small part on most women's bodies. Most people are smaller under bust than they are over bust. And there will be tension on this because it's going to stretch to go over shoulders and bust line to put it on, or if you step into it, up over hips to get it on. So now that I've made my little pretty lace circle, I've switched back to my zigzag foot. I've switched my machine back to zigzag stitch that I've been using, and I've quartered my piece of lace. So I have where it's overlapped will be the side seam. And then I have center front, center back, and other side seam marked with pins. So if you're looking at your directions, we're down to step 12. And what we're actually going to be doing is taking our bodice, and here at the sides, don't overlap at the side seam here. They sit side by side. So we're going to kind of put these side by side. I've got all of my basting lines in here. And we're going to take that side seam with the side seam I have here. We're going to line everything up and start pinning it together so that we can zigzag this on. So what I'm going to do is center front and side seams and not worry about the gathers at all yet. So you can kind of see how this looks. So I have not pulled in any of my gathers yet. Started. So here's my little lace, and we're going to just keep going around. Got to match my other side seam, and then we can start pulling those gathers in the front in between to make everything line up. And in the back, I think we have a little stretching to do. Let me do. Now in the center back, I'm just going to find the center back and match that up first. All right, so now I'm going to hold this up. So here it is, pinned on, but not gathered, so you can kind of see it looks lumpy. And I'm going to put a few more pins in. The back's pretty much, there's not a lot of gathers in the back. There's a little bit. I'm going to just pin and stretch just a tiny bit. The front, however, so anyway, I'm going to gather. I'm going to take my little basting lines and do a little gathering to get that lined up. So I'm going to just start getting everything pinned nicely, and then I'll show you a close-up of all of that pinning, and then we'll be ready to come back over and zigzag that around, and then we'll be ready to go to the skirt. We're very close to done. And I think I have enough lace that I can do lace on the bottom of the skirt edge too. So I have pinned in. Here's how it looks pinned. I've pulled in the bust line here, and I kind of, if you think about how your body is built, you can adjust these gathers accordingly. So I'm very full busted, but I don't need gathers towards the center and towards the side seam. So you can see here on the side, it's flat. There's no gathers right here. And then there's gathers sort of in the middle of most of the middle of the cup. And then it's flat again towards the center front. I do that on both sides. And that's just because that's where the gathers are needed on my body. I don't need the gathers to be here. I need them here. In the back, you can see all my strings. Those are all my basting lines, and I'm not going to cut them till it's stitched in. You can see there's just a little bit of fullness and gathering. So I pinned center back, and then I divided the center back and the lace again here, and then I pinned that area just to keep it nice and even. And then when I will just slightly stretch this when I go to stitch this in. So we're just going to zigzag all the way around the circle right along this edge, and then we'll come back and I'll pull out all of these basting lines, and we're going to trim away this also before moving on to the skirt. So if you're looking at your directions, we've done that. We're getting ready to do number 13 here, where we're just zigzagging around. And again, I did not butt them up. I overlapped 1/4 inch. It's just more secure. That's where I overlapped the 1/4 inch. It's stronger than having them just butt up against each other. I'm to the back. Here's my little side seam, and you can kind of see the fullness here. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to hang on back here for stability, and I'm going to stretch here, and we're going to zigzag. You don't want to stretch more than the lace. You want to stretch just as far as the lace needs to go. And don't stretch your your fabric, just the lace. So you're stretching lace to meet fabric. All right, that's it. I'm almost all the way around. I just have this little section left, and then I'll show you how it looks, and we'll start trimming. Okay, we're in the home stretch. If you're working with me, we have got a very pretty little bodice made. Now we're ready. So if you've done it, we're up to step 13. That's where we've gotten to. I'm going to now get my scissors, and I'm going to trim away all of this excess back here. So just like we did before, what's behind the lace, we're going to trim that away. And I'm going to take out all my basting stitches and give it a good haircut. So all of that's going to happen. And we're going to do the side seams for the skirt part. Now it's 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can come to your sewing machine and just do this tiny zigzag on the 1/4 inch if you want to. That's perfectly fine. If you have an overlock machine, then just overlock your 2 side seams together. Both will work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just overlock my side seams really quickly. And we can tell the front from the back. The front arcs up, the back arcs down, so there is a slight difference between the two. And I'm going to mark my center front and my center back because it's going to help me when pinning the skirt onto the bodice to around the lace. Once we've done that, it's hem. I'm going to apply lace to my hem. Otherwise you can turn up your 1/4 inch and just top stitch it in. Because you're working with tricot or a knit of some kind, as a rule you don't need any seam finishes, especially super fine knits like this. Don't fray or ravel. Sometimes they will pull, but you usually don't have to worry about seam finishes at all. You just really want them to have a zigzag so you don't get a popped stitch. So all of that said, let's put our skirt together. Let's get all of our bodice part, the trimming up done and the haircut done, and get it all nice and neat so that we can marry the two to each other. So I'll be back in about 15 minutes after I get all of those things done. All right, we are ready to marry the bodice to the skirt, which is 14, 15, 16, 17-ish. So that's where we are. I have sewn my skirt portion together. So here's my side seam. I've just serged it together, pressed it, and now I'm pinning, and I'm sliding the whole skirt on to get up to this little underbust waistline. We're only pinning 1/4 inch. That's our overlap. So lace to skirt is only 1/4 inch. So I've quartered my skirt and my bodice. So this is center front skirt, center front bodice to side seam. Here's center back skirt, center back bodice, and all the way around. And I'm going to start on the side seam, and we're just sewing around the circle. I will do slightly, I'm just slightly stretching this elastic. There's a couple inches difference between elastic and under bust of the skirt here, the top of the skirt. And once that's done, we're ready to do the lace at the hem. It's pinned together, it's quartered. And I'm going to slide this on, skirt sliding in. I'm going to start at the side seam. There will be just a little bit of stretching of the elasticy lace to make it match. We're going to now just put the lace on the bottom of the skirt. This is all done. Isn't that pretty? I just love these kinds of projects. They're so pretty. All right, just zigzagging around the edge. I'm just overlapping it about 1/4 inch, so I'm actually adding a little length to the edge of my skirt. Okay, I'm ready to do lace around the hem. I'm literally going to just lay the lace on top and start zigzagging around. I have not cut it to length, and I won't until I get all the way around to the other side, and I'll cut it to length when I match it back up over here. And I think I have plenty, even though it's sort of a full skirt, and it's going to be lovely. And I'm just going to overlap and go. You can see the hem going on. It looks great. I'm all the way around where I started. I'm so fortunate. This is all that I have left of my lace, so I have just enough. Boy, that worked out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to zigzag. Oh, this, I need to change my needle. I can tell it's getting unhappy. To where they're overlapping. And then I'm going to rotate it down, and I'm just going to stitch straight down like this. And then I'll trim off this excess piece of lace. And my slip is done. Not my slip, my gown. All right, I'm going to finish this, and I'll meet you over at the dress form and show you how it looks finished. All right, let me show you this beautiful little gown. Didn't that turn out pretty? So I've put it on the larger dress form, the one that's closer to my size. Does this not look like a cute little summery dress? Couldn't you see doing this in a cute cotton knit and finding a nice lace to do this? And I think it would make a cute summery dress, or a swimsuit cover-up. Would be very easy to convert. It's also easy to shorten or lengthen if you wanted to. You can see how the lace crosses at the shoulder. The front bust line looks. It's all trimmed away behind so that it's sort of a peekaboo lace. And I did add lace to the hemline. You can see it's sort of a deep side here instead of having the side bodice come up. Actually a very easy and fun way to sew. It's only a little steamy in on my lace. See you next week for another fun video.